elections. You have people who are conducting polls. You have pundits, experts who give their opinion. And in the U.S., the conventional wisdom of all of this analysis was that it would be an extremely, extremely close election, and anything was possible. And in the end, President Obama won pretty handily, as we say. He didn't have too much trouble winning, and so people are analyzing what that means. And in the same way here in Georgia, a lot of the polls suggested that the previous government was going to win in the election. And then in the end, I think to the surprise of many people, including to the surprise of Georgian Dream, the Georgian Dream coalition prevailed. And so I think it says, voters don't like to be taken for granted. In the United States, the media spends so much time predicting what's going to happen that sometimes voters feel that their vote doesn't matter. And so what they will do is say, well, if the media is saying this, then I will do something different. I'm going to be an individual and I'm going to express myself, and I want my vote to count for something, not simply to validate somebody else's opinion. And I think in that respect, both elections have shown that the opinion of the individual voters really matters, and that's the most important thing in democracy. It's the beginning of the process.
Thank you. Any more questions, please?
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for coming. I have a question. What is the role of media in the elections?
I'm sorry, oh, there you are.
Yes.
Could you
What is the role of media in the elections?
Media.
The only way that candidates can, the candidates have two ways of getting their ideas out and their policy programs out to the voters. They can either buy advertising or their positions can be reported in the media. When the media reports something, normally it's viewed as more objective, more balanced than if you have simply paid advertising. If you pay for the advertising, you own the message. The message is going to inevitably be a little bit one-sided. But when the media reports something, it can have more impact on what voters believe. And so it's extremely important to have media that are objective and that are able to reach all the voters who are out there. That the must-carry legislation was very important in the Georgian context in that respect. In the United States, we've kind of gotten into a polarized media situation. You sort of have the CNN on one side and Fox News on the other, and it used to be people would tune into news, and there was a guy named Walter Cronkite, who was a famous American journalist, and people generally believed everything Walter Cronkite said, and he was pretty much middle of the road. Now there's a tendency for people to go and seek out the view that they're more comfortable with. So if they're conservative, they might turn to Fox News. If they're more moderate or liberal, they might turn to CNN. But that defeats the purpose of media coverage and of journalism. It's to inform people in an objective way, not to simply validate their opinions. So the role of media is changing. It's influenced by social media now, Facebook and the internet and all of that. So it's a rapidly changing environment, but it's extremely important still for the success of democracy. It affects what people believe, and they will vote depending on what they believe.
Thank you very much. Question?
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. First of all, I personally want to thank you for the time you have reserved for us. And I want to congratulate the successful elections, of course. And my question is about what are restrictions or limitations on spending money during elections in the United States? Thank you.
There are none, no. It's a very sensitive issue, actually, the role of money in politics. And in our country, if you are going to be a candidate who is supported by funds from the federal government, funds that are put into the federal system for allocation to candidates, there are limits on what each candidate can get. But under our system, you can also decide not to receive any money from the government for your campaign and raise it all privately. And then there are no limits on what you can raise privately. There are limits on what individual contributors can give to individual candidates, but there are almost no limits on what individual people or individual corporations can give to lobbying groups that generally support certain candidates. There was a very controversial Supreme Court decision a couple of years ago on this point, which greatly opened up the way to more corporate money in the election process, and it's extremely controversial. I remember once asking an American congressman, why is this that we allow money to play such an important role? And he was a pretty moderate Republican, not too left, not too right. And he said, look, it's you can vote with your vote and you can vote with your dollar. It's your right. In a way, it's freedom of speech. And so our system still tends to view money as a way of expressing your belief, not just with your voice, but with tangible assets. But when you look at the amount of money that is spent on elections, it's staggering, and I'm not sure it's healthy. The last point to make about this is that one reason why people need so much money, they think they need so much money, is to buy television advertising, because that's seen as the defining element of a successful political campaign. And because in our country the networks are private and they are not obliged to provide free time to candidates during the campaign for their messages to be broadcast, the candidates all must buy the television time. It's very expensive. The big markets like New York are incredibly expensive, and so you need millions and millions and millions of dollars. A Senate campaign in Connecticut, one person who ran spent $100 million on their campaign, and they lost. A lot of it is because of the media requirement.
Thank you. Thank you. I would thank Mr. Ambassador for overwhelming answers. That's very informative and wonderful. And now we have...
Hello?
Yeah.
I have one question. Okay, good day, Mr. Ambassador. You're welcome to our investor again. Okay, my question is just very, very simple and short, actually. What is the reason and the influence for holding a presidential debate in the United States of America? And do you think it's actually advisable for this system to be adopted in Georgia?
I think the debates are seen as very important in the process, because people can read about each candidate's policy proposals, they can read about their ideas, they can look at their television ads and so forth. But I think the democratic process, the voting process, is still a very personal thing at the end of the day. You're looking at an individual and you're saying, do I want this person to represent me? Do I think this person would be a good leader for my country? And the debate process is probably the best way of personalizing those impressions. You can sometimes see candidates at political events, at rallies and so forth, but it's not the same thing as seeing the candidates have to debate each other on their ideas, their character, their history. And so I think the debate process is a format that will continue in the US. I think it was adopted partially during the campaign here in Georgia. I think most democratic processes, one way or another, allow for a debate to take place between candidates for the reasons I described.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, I'm happy to talk to you. As an Iranian student here in U.S. Foreign Affairs, I have two questions. The first question is that as Mr. Obama is elected as the president, how do you see the foreign policy of the U.S. in the preceding years towards Iran, as the conflicts of Iran and Israel is raised in the region? And the second thing is that, unfortunately or fortunately, Mr. Obama has put lots of sanctions against Iran, and it has affected both the Iranian government and the people. Do you find it fair, because it has really affected people in Iran and in other countries, the normal life of Iranians? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Well, I think you're going to see continuity in the basic lines of President Obama's foreign policy. He wound down the one war in Iraq, and he's going to wind down our combat presence in Afghanistan. He's going to try to to recognize the fact that China is now the world's fastest growing economy, and that in a sense the global center of gravity has shifted to the Far East, and global trade and commerce and culture are going to take all of this into account. And by the way, that puts Georgia in a very good position, because you're on the new Silk Road here. I think that you know, with respect to Iran and other things in the Middle East, you know, there seems to be a conflict underway within the Islamic world for the heart and soul of Islam. And that conflict is played out between radicals and moderates. It's played out between Shia and Sunni. And Iran, of course, has a long history of the Persian Empire, one of the great civilizations of the world. And it's an important voice in how this debate over Islam will play out. And quite frankly, although the United States has a tremendous interest in the outcome of this battle, of this struggle, it's not our struggle. And in fact, the more we get involved, sort of the worse it is. So the best we can do is try to help on the margins here, and to help the different actors resolve these issues in a peaceful way, because it is a conflict that they're trying to manage. On the sanctions on Iran, it is regrettable that we're in this position. I've been a diplomat now for 32 years, and when I first joined the Foreign Service, the first thing I did was sit in our operations center as the American embassy hostages were being released and brought back from their captivity. And we have never had an embassy in Iran since. And that's an unnatural situation. But the fact is, from our perspective, the Iranian government is in the position to decide this issue. The international community, through the International Atomic Energy Agency, has spelled out the requirements that Iran must observe in terms of peaceful use of nuclear energy. And as soon as those requirements are met, then the sanctions will be eased. And I know Iran has a different view on that. This is a negotiation that I think will go forward, and I think we're all reasonably confident it will have a peaceful outcome. It's important for everybody that there be a peaceful outcome on that issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The American Studies Department wants to present you a small gift, since you're first time here, and since we have Jubilee today, 10th anniversary. So.
There's one more question before I go. I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise,
and the head of trustee board of Chakra Foundation, our main investors, and the fund is very important for us, So Mr. Adam has to say a few words, as I've heard. We will present you the journals, if you permit us.